The Harvester is one of the 2 new event towers from the Hexscape Halloween event, and it is obtained by beating every night on hard mode. You can also buy for 799 Robux. The Harvester is much harder to get than the Hallowpunk, but is it actually good? I'll be taking a look at its stats, values, and uses, then give my personal ranking of how good it is. So, hit that like button and subscribe, and let's get started. It costs 1,400 cash to place, meaning you can't get it in the early game. It attacks using a crossbow, which can pierce and hit multiple enemies. On top of that, it has the Thorn Summon ability, which allows you to place a line of thorns anywhere on the track. The thorns damage and slow down enemies. At level 0, it deals 6 damage, has a fire rate of 1.208, 13 range, 2 pierce, and deals 4.96 DPS. It also has flying detection. Its thorns deal 2 damage every 0.5 seconds, slow enemies by 15%, and last for 8 seconds. The ability has a cooldown of 40 seconds. The thorns can also damage hidden enemies, despite the tower itself not getting hidden detection. At level 1, for a total of 2,050 cash, its damage is increased to 8, its range is increased to 15, and its DPS is increased to 6.62. Its thorns now deal 4 damage and take up slightly more space on the track. At level 2, for a total of 4,050 cash, its damage is increased to 10, its fire rate is decreased to 0.858, its range is increased to 17, its pierce is increased to 3, and its DPS is increased to 11.65. Its thorns now deal 6 damage, last 10 seconds, and slow enemies by 20%. At level 3, for a total of 9,050 cash, its damage is increased to 20, its range is increased to 19, and its DPS is increased to 23.31. The thorns now deal 12 damage and take up even more space on the track. At level 4, for a total of 17,550 cash, its damage is increased to 30, its fire rate is decreased to 0.758, its range is increased to 21.5, and its DPS is increased to 39.57. Its thorns now deal 20 damage, last for 16 seconds, slow enemies by 25%, and take up more space on the track. Finally, at level 5, for a total of 37,550 cash, its damage is increased to 90, its fire rate is increased to 1.508, its range is increased to 26.5, its pierce is increased to 4, and its DPS is increased to 59.68. The thorns now deal 30 damage, slow enemies by 30%, and take up even more space on the track. There are 2 main aspects to this tower we have to look at: the tower itself and the thorns from its ability. Let's start by looking at the tower. At level 0, it deals 4.96 DPS and costs 1,400 cash to place. That gives it a value of 3.54, which is kind of mid. Unfortunately, the kind of piercing this tower does usually isn't that helpful. Unless you place it right in front of a straight path, it most often is only going to be hitting 1 enemy. But let's say you do have good placement and is hitting the max of 3 enemies per shot. That gives it a value of 10.63 DPS per 1k spent, which is actually pretty good. Remember though, this is the best case scenario. At max level, for a total of 37,550 cash, it deals 59.68 DPS. That gives it a value of 1.59, which is low-key trash. It does however have a pierce of 4, meaning it can hit up to 5 enemies. If you once again assume it has the best placement and is against a crowd, that gives it a potential max DPS of 298.4 or a value of 7.95. But you usually won't be hitting nearly this many enemies with each shot. So far, this tower may seem to be pretty mid, but it gets much better once you begin considering its Thorn Summon ability. The ability is amazing against crowds of enemies, as not only does it deal decent DPS, but it has unlimited pierce and slows down enemies. At max level, the thorns deal 60 DPS, slow enemies by 30%, and last 16 seconds. That means if you have a max level Harvester and use the ability on a big crowd of 50 enemies, you'll be dealing 3,000 DPS. That is insanely good. It makes the Harvester now one of the best crowd control towers in the game. And on top of dealing tons of damage, 30% slow is actually really solid, making this also a great stalling tower. You can get up to 4 Harvesters, and if you use all their abilities at the same time, you can delete crowds of enemies. However, keep in mind that the ability does have a decently long cooldown of 40 seconds, so be careful of when you use it. But if you have 4 Harvesters up, because the thorns last for 16 seconds, you can comfortably have at least 1 set of thorns up at all times. This ability is also good at its earlier levels, but I personally recommend sticking to using this tower in the mid to late game once you have a couple other towers as well. It's a bit too expensive and unreliable to count on in the early game, as you'll need 4 Harvesters to counter its ability cooldown. Because of that, I think it's best used in the mid to late game. This is where the biggest crowds of enemies come anyways, which is what is most effective against. There's actually one more secret ability of this tower that we haven't looked at yet, and that is something called Nature's Bond. When using the Thorn Summon ability, any farms in range of the Harvester and close to the track will produce thorns of their own. The thorns deal half as much damage as a Harvester's thorns and last half as long, but still, this can add significantly more DPS against crowds. So when using this tower, make sure you have some of your farms near the track. It sounds weird, I know, but this is the meta now. While the tower itself may not be great, its ability is absolutely amazing and can deal serious damage against crowds. If you take advantage of the Nature's Bond ability, I think this tower can easily be an S tier in terms of crowd control. You have to be a bit strategic and careful when using it, but it can do some huge DPS. I think it could be very effective in game modes like Badlands 2, which have hordes of breakers. But with that, that's it for this video. Let me know in the comments below how you would rank this tower and whether or not you agree with me. And if you enjoyed, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to join the Blue Head Mafia. Also, if you want to talk to me, consider checking out my Discord. We got some pretty cool features, like a custom party finder bot that will will automatically pair you up with other people who are trying to do the same strategy. There's a link to the server pinned in the comments. And finally, I want to give a huge shout out to these channel members for supporting my content. If you want to add me as a friend on Roblox or get early access to some of my videos, consider becoming a channel member. It helps me out a lot and I really appreciate it. Anyways, that's it for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.